As a young man, John Quincy Adams was appointed United States Ambassador to several nations by both George Washington and his father, John Adams. In December 1815, he was the United States chief negotiator at the Treaty of Ghent, which brought the 1812 war between the United States and Britain to an end and settled a number of outstanding issues. Before becoming president in 1825, he was one of America's most distinguished secretaries of state. As State Secretary, he negotiated the Adams-Honest Treaty of 1819, which purchased Florida from Spain and determined the boundary line between New Spain and an expanded United States. He was also the main author of the historic foreign policy document known as the Monroe Doctrine. John Quincy Adams was born on the 11th of July, 1767 in Braintree, Massachusetts, which is today known as Quincy. At the age of 11, he accompanied his father, John Adams, on a diplomatic mission throughout Europe. In fact, during the Revolutionary War, he spent most of his teenage years assisting his father throughout Europe. In 1785, at the age of 18, he returned to the United States to study law at Harvard College. He later qualified as a lawyer, and in 1795 he married Catherine Johnston in London. They had 4 children, 1 daughter and 3 sons. In the mid to late 1790s, John Quincy Adams served as the United States ambassador to several European nations. When Jefferson defeated his father in the 1800 election, John Quincy's diplomatic career took a setback for a number of years. However, the following year, in 1802, Federalist leaders in Massachusetts arranged for John Quincy's election to the United States Senate. In subsequent years, Adams found himself in conflict with Federalist policies in relation to, say, for instance, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. John Quincy Adams, like Jefferson, believed strongly in the westward expansion of the United States, a concept then known as manifest destiny. He also supported Jefferson in relation to the Embargo Act of 1807. In fact, his support for Jeffersonian policies was so strong that his Federalist base in Massachusetts was weakened, so that he was forced to resign his Senate seat in 1808. However, 12 months later, in 1809, he was back in mainstream politics when President Madison appointed him as Minister to Russia. From here, he encouraged Russia to act as mediator in the British-American War of 1812. By late 1814, Adams led a powerful US delegation in negotiations at Ghent. These talks brought the 1812 war to an end, but left a number of border issues between the United States and North America unresolved. When James Madison became president in March 1817, he appointed John Quincy as his Secretary of State. As State Secretary, he led the US delegation in the Convention of 1818. This treaty dealt with a wide range of issues, from the restoration of slaves to fishery rights on the Great Lakes and a number of other issues. However, the 2 most important issues it resolved was the boundary line between the United States and British North America, as Canada was then known. The boundary was agreed along the 49th parallel, and it was also agreed that both nations would have joint control of the Oregon country for a period of 10 years. In the South, there was ongoing conflict between the Indian tribes and white settlers. Native Americans found themselves gradually being pushed westwards and southwards by a combination of treaties and military campaigns. They fought back with cross-border raids on white settlements in the Florida region. However, in response, General Andrew Jackson invaded Florida in May 1818. Jackson captured Pensacola, the Spanish capital of Florida. From there, he controlled the entire region and forced the Spanish authorities into peace talks with the United States government in late 1818. John Quincy Adams actually supported the Jackson strategy and eventually agreed to the Adams-Honest Treaty in February 1819. This treaty agreed the purchase of Florida for $5 million, which cleared the debt on the Spanish territory, and it also set the boundary line between Spanish-Mexican territory and an expanded United States. The Adams-Honest Treaty was ratified by Congress in 1821, and the following year the Monroe administration recognized several South American republics which had freed themselves from Spanish colonialism. In 1823, the British Foreign Secretary George Canning proposed a joint British-United States foreign policy in relation to South America. He suggested both countries should issue a joint warning against other powers interfering in South America. Two ex-presidents, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, agreed with the British proposal, and it was debated for months in Congress. However, John Quincy Adams, as Secretary of State, was totally opposed to the idea. He eventually persuaded the President to his viewpoint and was the main author of the foreign policy document known as the Monroe Doctrine, which was addressed to Congress by the President in December 1823. Adams contested the November 1824 presidential election and came second behind Andrew Jackson, who won 88 Electoral College votes. However, Adams became president on the basis of a deal with Henry Clay. He began his presidency with the accusation of a corrupt bargain having existed between himself and Clay, who achieved only 37 Electoral College votes but was now in the position of Secretary of State. Richard Rush, who had conducted the Rush-Bagot Treaty with the British in 1817, became Treasury Secretary. Adams quickly took advantage of the 1824 Supreme Court decision in Gibbons versus Ogden, which interpreted the Commerce Clause of the Constitution to allow the federal government to advance major infrastructural projects. His administration oversaw the construction of major interstate roads, canals, and railroads. However, Jackson Democrats branded him as a Federalist, who was a danger to the sovereignty of state governments. Andrew Jackson was offered but refused the job of Secretary of War in the administration and instead began his campaign to win the 1828 election straight away. Adams, as a very experienced international diplomat, promoted a number of treaties with Denmark, Russia, and a number of other nations. Such treaties, however, laid the basis of future prosperity for the United States, but were not really fully appreciated by the public at that time. They were more impressed with Jackson's status as a war hero and his populist appeal. In many ways, history repeated itself as Jackson supporters exploited a fear of the federal government becoming too dominant, as Jefferson had done 20 years earlier with his father, John Adams. In relation to the Native Americans, Adams attempted to pursue a policy of peace treaties and assimilation. However, white settlers, especially in the South and West, insisted on a more aggressive policy in line with Andrew Jackson's views and the views of many Southern governors. At the end of 1826, the Jacksonian wing of the Democratic Republican Party won the midterm elections and largely dominated the political agenda for the next 2 years. In 1827 and 28, many congressmen supported a very high tariff, both to finance infrastructural projects and to discourage imports, thereby allowing American industry at home to grow. However, the practical effect of the tariff, which was extremely high, sometimes 37 or even 45%, it was very high, the impact of this tariff on the US economy led to a situation where many Jacksonian supporters disclaimed the tariff and basically blamed the President, Adams, for signing it into law. Many called it the tariff of abominations, and it contributed to both inflation, unemployment, and the defeat of Adams in the 1828 election. Adams also failed to match the modern campaigning techniques of Jackson, however. Throughout the 1827, there was major political figures such as Henry Clay began to desert Adams in favour of Jackson. Jackson focused on the supposed corruption and elitism of the Adams administration and won 178 votes out of 261 and over 50% of the popular vote. No new states joined the Union during the Adams presidency. It remained at 24 states and the population was almost 13 million. In 1830, John Quincy Adams won a seat in the House of Representatives, which he held for 18 years. As an ex-president, he was a very principled congressman, opposed to many of the Jackson spoil system ideas, and also opposed the gag rule in relation to slavery. As chairman of the Commerce Committee, he played an insignificant role in defusing the nullification crisis of the 1830s. John Quincy Adams and his father John were the only two of the first 12 presidents who were not slave owners. He is considered by many historians to have been a brilliant Secretary of State, but something of an average president and a very principled congressman. He was the first president to be photographed. He died from a stroke in 1848.